Well, I would like to talk to you about my Quran and why it is so different from all the other Qurans that you can buy. And the reason that it's so different is simple. My Quran can be read and understood, whereas the Quran you will buy at the bookstore, you probably won't read all of it, and even if you do, you will not understand it. Now, there's a reason for this. You see, the original Quran was produced by Uthman, the third caliph. He had a problem. There were different memorized versions of the Quran, and they differed from each other. That is, there was variation. So in order to get rid of the variation, Uthman called in all of the Qurans and had a new Quran produced. Then the original source material was all burned. Now you wonder why he did that, but we think we know because there was variation. But in doing so, one of the things they did was they arranged the Quran in order of the longest chapter to the shortest chapter. So there's no story or time sequence in it, which makes it very confusing and hard to understand. In a sense, the Quran you buy at the bookstore is like a jigsaw puzzle, but it's all taken apart. Whereas in my Quran, they differ in several ways. Number one, all the material is in the right time order, so you start at the beginning and go down to the end. The other thing is since there's so much repetition in the Quran, I group all the stories together. So the story of Moses is told over and over again, so we collect all those together. But the third and most important part about what makes my Qurans different is that I integrate Muhammad's life into it. You see, when you're reading the bookstore Quran, you feel like you're being intellectually mugged because all of a sudden they'll start talking about a topic. For instance, there's a verse about it was okay to burn some palm trees. Well, as a reader of the Quran, you're left with like, well, whose palm trees were they burning? And why were they being burned? In my version, there's not a problem because we take the Quran and we intersperse with it the life of Mohammed. So when you read my Quran, you know that before the trees were burned, Mohammed had attacked a tribe of Jews and had been unable to break into their fortress. And they were date palm farmers, so he cut down and burned their palm tree. So in reading my Quran, you always have a context for all the verses. So my Quran's in the right time sequence, similar topics are grouped together, and there's a context given by Muhammad's life. Now, it's not confusing when Muhammad speaks or Allah speaks, so you have those two stories straight, but at the same time, you're now able to understand what you're reading because there's a story in it and it has context. Now, I sell three different Qurans. There's the original, a simple Quran, which is lengthy. It's just due to that nature. But then I sell an abridged Quran, which is half as long. And the reason it's only half as long is I took out all the enormous amount of repetition, so it produces a smaller book. Then, in order to induce people to try to read the Quran, I also produced what I call a 2-hour Quran, which is the same as a simple Quran, except that it's been greatly selected down to the key elements. So you really can read my 2-hour Quran and in, yes, 2 hours, get an entirely good idea of what the Quran is about. Thank you.